If you're a renter, you no doubt have been feeling the squeeze from rising rents. In fact, while increases are averaging between 5 and 10% a year, in some areas of our nation, rents are up by over 25% in the last year alone. Not surprisingly, highly competitive markets in places like Florida and California top the list for the highest increases. All told, over 20 million of us are paying more than the recommended 30% of our monthly income for rent.
We need to ensure that there is a steady flow of affordable workforce housing available in the local community, and therefore it may require government assistance.
One solution that's been around for a long time in some areas is rent control. In 1942, then-President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Emergency Price Control Act into law in order to prevent inflation in the booming, fully employed wartime economy by setting price control. When the Emergency Price Control Act expired in 1947, Congress passed the Federal Housing and Rent Act of 1947, which exempted construction after February 1st of that year from rent control. Some state or local governments, particularly within large urban areas, took over when federal regulation ended. In general, rent control laws aim to temper escalating rents, particularly in markets where there's an inequality in bargaining power between landlords and tenants due to high demand and a low supply. They do that by limiting the rent that a landlord can charge and setting standards for landlords to terminate a lease, basically requiring landlords to conduct certain maintenance and providing a system of oversight and enforcement.
Without more affordable homes, it leads to the bifurcation in the community where you have only the wealthy living in one area and people who are in the service industry living very long distances.
There's a big misconception, landlords are not normally given a lot of credit for their position as landlords.
But like many housing policies, there's a flip side to rent control. Opponents argue that some rent control policies discourage private investment in rentals, creating shortages that can actually exacerbate the exact housing challenges that these policies aim to correct. Some argue that tenants in non-rent control units wind up paying higher rents than they would have because the landlords need to make up the difference for the lower rents they charge in the controlled units.
If you educate the tenant on what their responsibilities are pertaining to a leased property and how to take care of the property, you will have a balanced relationship.
Or that these policies encourage landlords to cut back on maintenance and upkeep, resulting in a decline in community housing quality.
Because if you educate a landlord on his obligations under the law, then that landlord will become very educated and understand what his obligations are and will no longer be called the slumlord.
And from an ethical viewpoint, rent control arguably unfairly puts the burden of housing affordability on the backs of a few people.
You have to build that relationship, and without relationship, there's no common ground.
Tell us what you think about rent control and other policies impacting renters, or email your questions to asktheexpert@shariolefson.com.